what is something that each of these covers has in common? Well, actually, there are going to be a couple of different details you could point out, but I am specifically referring to him. Gryal Repa was one example of the Brethren Lords, who are recurring characters within this first set of 4 books, all of which are out now on Amazon, paperback and ebook, links down below. The Brethren Lords are individuals that have come up in videos before now. Indeed, some of what I cover in this video might be a little bit of a recap of some of those things, but now all consolidated into one place with some extra new information, and say they are important, very much so, to the plot of those books if you have read them or are intending to read them. If you haven't read them yet, please do consider them. With that in mind, what I'm doing today is, as the title and thumbnail suggest in turn, giving you a brief history of this group of immortals. Hello and welcome to the Ragnarok Chronicles. My name is Dominic and this is the channel where we talk about the lore of the books that I am writing. In the beginning of the current iteration of the multiverse at least, you had the entities, the species that will go by no other term other than whatever means entity in the language of whoever they're speaking to. And they view themselves as godlike and in dominion over everything within our planes of reality. They exist within the outer region as a separate dimension to where we are on Earth in the Alpha Realm. However, after certain events that occur very early in their existence, relatively speaking, they are not able to really interact with some of the other dimensions, such as the Alpha Realm. Therefore, experiments were undertaken to try to find ways in which they could nevertheless understand and interact with those other realms under their control. Thus, they had a few individuals among their number who did have their own names. The lack of a name is merely for them as an overall concept. Individually, they still need to refer to themselves in certain ways. So there are a few of those who underwent a process that took them from being pure energy into having physical matter forms. From their entity names, these were replaced by 2 names each respectively, which were picked to reflect on the 2 characteristics that it was felt these new physical bodies each had, or they exemplified most. So Varlun became Gryal Repa, and what you'll be seeing below, at least for the entity versions of the names, these are the closest Romanized spellings that we can have for the actual Brethren Lords names. Those are acknowledged, they're definitely what they are in the Roman alphabet, but Varlun became Gryal Repa in charge, Oonaiah became Petti Lance, Ewurathre became Stark Vingfamyn, Uhrrez became Khaonat Rhaldyzata. Meanwhile, the original names for Warren Mars and Uhrrez have been lost to history. As I say, the function of these Brethren Lords, these entities given physical form, was to study the Alpha Realm. Unfortunately, even with physical matter, they still couldn't safely be present within our dimension. Nevertheless, they were given these large structures of towers where you have mechanical infrastructure built on top of existing stray asteroids and other celestial bodies within the outer region. You have 1 tower per universe in the Alpha Realm, and they're each just studying that reality for the eons, just taking in every single detail 1 bit at a time. That's part of the reason why the towers have to be so big, in order to contain enough to process all of this information on a universal scale. Even with these tools, though, the pursuit was still on to try to find a way to actually perpetually inhabit the Alpha Realm. They had your hexagons, which were derived from the Watch, so both of these being devices which can create artificial bubbles of outreach reality within the Alpha Realm, but they're very localised and not permanent solutions. But beyond that, they're trying to find another way to inhabit there properly, or have someone loyal who works for them who can inhabit there properly. And while they're searching for this, they're looking through what species they can find in the Alpha Realm to see if any of them would be applicable. Meanwhile, back with the main entities, they are hence in the midst of the Beta Incursion, which is your first proper conflict to occur in our iteration of the multiverse, taking place in the Beta Realm, which is like the pocket remnant of the multiverse that came before us. Through that, you have a race which I have acknowledged when I brought them up previously, as I haven't actually got a name for them yet, because the stories and the books that will cover these are much later down the line. I just at this stage refer to them as the Exodus aliens, because they are trying to leave the Beta Realm, having been survivors of the previous multiverse. They, as part of their thing, send out a ship into the Alpha Realm, because as well as their whole thing is that they want to take remnants and traces and records of all the life forms from the previous multiverse, and they are going to leave our multiverse entirely to find somewhere new. But they also recognise actually we'll take records, if we can, of this multiverse's life forms as well. So they send out a ship that's meant to quickly scan all of our reality to take note of all our species. This is technology that would greatly increase the efficiency of the Brethren Lord's pursuits. Therefore, for that alone, they are trying to get a hold of this extra ship. Meanwhile, those aliens, because they realise that they're trespassing and they're causing some sort of annoyance on some degree, they try to leave some compensation. They notice that the Brethren Lords have been searching other species to try to find one applicable for them, and thus they calculate that they can create or set up a series of events which will lead to the evolution of an applicable species. And as such, they send a meteor heading towards a planet that we would call Earth approximately 65 million years ago, because again they acknowledge, okay, if this happens and evolution will likely take place in this route, and you end up with humans, whose DNA is the closest that you have to what the Brethren Lord's new physical forms are anyway, and also we should be able to have ziangg, dark matter, prima materia, incorporated into that genetics to give us abilities that would aid us in being the emissaries of the Brethren Lords. The Exodus aliens escape, the Brethren Lords don't get them, but whether or not they actually make the connection to how humanity came about, they notice humanity in the wake of it, and thus begin the process of inventing the Mancynns, people with ziangg in their DNA. The Beta Incursion at this stage is still going on. The other Brethren Lords could help with that, but the entities in the confidence saying they don't need it. The Brethren Lords just continue with their job, studying the Alpha Realm. The job of cultivating the Mancynns, looking after them, is left to Khaonat specifically. Meanwhile, the other Lords, again, because there are so many towers on inconceivable orders of magnitude, the others have to keep on monitoring those. It's not like they go around all of them. It's probably impossible for them to have gone around all of them even now, but they monitor where they can move about, and there are other mechanisms for checking the running of the other towers. Elsewise, I've talked about that previously. This carries on being the status quo for a while, until finally the Beta Incursion is done. The entities have come out victorious, and they return their attentions to the rest of existence. The account that they will tell shows that they discovered that Khaonat had rather been trying to cultivate the Mancynns up into an army. There he had built for them the city of Atlantis to be like a hub that they would rally within, showing them how to use their different powers, and it was a general threat that he was going to use them to try to overthrow the entities. As such, Khaonat was apprehended, sealed inside of the Casket. Meanwhile, all of the existing Mancynns were wiped out, along with Atlantis being sunk. The Brethren Lords could continue making Mancynns afterwards, however, they would only ever make one at a time, and otherwise there were limitations put in place upon the Mancynns to stop them from using all of their full potential for abilities. While the Brethren Lords weren't happy about what their brother had done and the whole situation there, they nevertheless didn't want to risk, the rest of them didn't want to risk their standing with the entities, therefore they made it clear that yes, no, what he did was wrong, we had nothing to do with that, we still stand with you. Sometime after this, the entities use their hexagons to investigate something that's been discovered within the Alpha Realm itself, a mechanism for greater travel around the multiverse. They present themselves actively as a deception, as gods to the aliens who had invented this technology, the Asnemwois, and ultimately stole that technology from them. when the Asnemwois realised what had happened, they used what technology had been left behind by the entities, because the entities are complacent, they don't care, they can do whatever they want, they can make more stuff of their own, they don't consider what other people would do with it, because whatever, why think about other lower creatures? The Asnemwois build up their own mechanisms to retaliate against the entities. You have a whole conflict war there that drives the entities out of the outer region, out of their home of the Cortex, and thus we have the period wherein the entities are in exile in what we would think of as the Andromeda Galaxy. Here they interacted with other aliens. I've done a whole video on that. And during this period, again, the Brethren Lords could offer some level of assistance, although the important thing is they just continue with their job. Meanwhile, though, at the same time, it should be noted that those Brethren Lords were also interacting with other individuals who, while the entities themselves might not have been against, like the entities' allies who they made while in the Andromeda Galaxy were against them, this being the criminal organisation Moravius. So Brethren Lords were also interacting with them as well, because why not? It was potentially interesting business. Of the members of Moravius, it was often Mirdi who was the delegate who they interacted with. So this period going on. That conflict in turn was resolved. The entities took back, well, they didn't take back the Cortex, they destroyed the Cortex with those Asnemwois inside, meanwhile built a new home for themselves of Tayhepuloz, or just simply the new Cortex. Following this, other attempts were made to get rid of the Asnemwois who hadn't been lost in that strike back. As a general rule, the entities do not like any notion that they could be stood up to, that there could be any challenge to their rulership. They should be unquestionably the ones in charge, because of course they are, that is the state of things. There's no denying that, but no one should be in a position to deceive people otherwise. And in this case, even more so, because they have been briefly successfully deposed, they want to make sure doubly that it doesn't happen again. It does not matter the lengths that they will go to, they will do whatever is necessary to prevent this, and their initial plot was to get rid of Tentortex. Tentortex is the creature which, at the end of the Alpha Realm timeline, basically consumes all of the matter that's left at the death of the universe, then relocates to the first universe in the Alpha Realm chain, and spews back out kind of the redigested, redistributed, broken down matter, which then becomes the beginning of what we would think of as the early universe, and it then continues and spirals from there. They wanted to kill the Tentortex to prevent it from creating all of this matter at the beginning of the Alpha Realm reality, so that later down the line, along with everything else, the Asnemwois could never have evolved, and that problem will be got rid of. Does not matter that you've now just eradicated everything else in the Alpha Realm. You've got other dimensions they can deal with instead. This did not work. I think that they tried and failed to get rid of Tentortex. It was a botched operation, which they gave up on afterwards. They would come up with different methods. They'd try to get it back against the Asnemwois instead. However, in the process, because they were involved too, Uhrrez, one of the Brethren Lords, died. Meanwhile, Petti was permanently disfigured. With the Brethren Lords therefore now being fully down 2 members, and again 1 being injured, the entities sought to compensate on this by taking another one of their number, Oonaiah, and turning him into another Brethren Lord, giving him physical form as well, and he became Mordrin Myrna. Just like the rest of the Brethren Lords, compared to us, Mordrin is eons old, but for them, he will always be junior, because the rest of them had all been made, there was technically a sequence to it, but all at the same time, Mordrin came later. He is always the youngest. And also, by that token, something of an outsider. With the entities, as I say, wishing to continue to strike back against the Asnemwois, at a certain point, Warren conducted simulations and experiments and came to a conclusion that a certain method that the entities would go to eventually would have drastic ramifications for the entirety of existence. It would threaten all life everywhere, not just within the Alpha Realm. As such, with this being the case, and the other lords being convinced, it became their mission to try to find a way to stop the entities from wanting to, or trying to, at least, go against the Asnemwois in this way that they would eventually do. The details of the plot that they came up with are a reveal kind of in Book 4, Tower of the Storm. Like, it's not a this changes everything thing, but rather these are simply details that aren't learnt until we get to that stage in the story. In the first 3 books, it's left vague and obscure what actually is they're going to do beyond it being dangerous. So, arguably, like, if you want to find this out as is intended in the books themselves, you can start watching now, read there, or just find out anyway. Again, it's not like a massive thing in terms of like the biggest reveals and twists that are going to be in those stories. So, the first stage of this plan involves Earth, and is what sets up everything that happens in those first 4 books. The idea is that they want to get Earth to a state where it can be used to create other weapons that would be turned on the entities. For reasons that I am definitely not stating here, because spoilers for one of the books, there is a portal within the Bermuda Triangle, the postern, which traditionally leads into the outer region. It can be made to go to different places in turn, but usually once opened, and is also not perpetually open, but on the rare occasions it's opened, it should lead out into the outer region. From there would then be another way to get to the new Cortex, another jumping point. But once, I say, Earth is taken over in this way, you have the weapons built, would fire into there, through the postern, through outer region, and towards the new Cortex. From there, getting the entities into a state of they are under attack. The other phase of this would be that the Brethren Lords would take the Citadel, which is a separate structure made by a different faction of entities who stayed behind in our reality rather than going to drive the Asnemwois out of their home previously in that old conflict. So they'll take the now abandoned Citadel as entity technology, weaponize that in turn, imbue it with temporal energy, and basically, because it's still entity technology, even if it's a different faction, like whilst the new Cortex is under attack, the Citadel would be piloted back there as they say, hey, we are on your side, we're your allies. Entities would accept it, but it's basically then like a Trojan horse / bomb that would wipe out the entities from within. They aren't just doing the Citadel side of things, rather that, well, if it should be accepted anyway, why are you attacking them from a different angle? Well, the attack is to catch them off guard, and so it reduces the chance of them potentially looking into it as much. They're more in a state of disarray, just going to say, oh yes, no, allies, here, come in, as opposed to those who are attacking us from over there. Because, though, the Brethren Lords don't want the attack from Earth to be drawn back to them, because, well, A, if the plan fails, they don't want it to be look on them, but also they don't want the entities to recognise anything in the attack. They should come from a completely strange enemy. The Brethren Lords can't just immediately take Earth, just, again, add their own structures there and all machinery and do that. No. The weapons need to be built using Earth's own technology. Like, the Brethren Lords can give them advice on how to construct certain things, but it should all be with Earth resources, with human methodology of constructing stuff. What this does mean, though, is that it takes a while for Earth to get to the state where this needs to be. It's going to take thousands of our years. To the Brethren Lords and the entities, that's not as much of a thing. That you can think of them using larger units of time, therefore the number would be smaller, but also with beings that are quote-unquote immortal, that have already existed for eons, the notion of it taking a few thousand years, it's not a few thousand of our years, it isn't as much of a thing for them. They're perceiving time differently. So naturally, even with humans existing, we wouldn't necessarily get to that sort of technological state. Therefore, using the one Mancynn at a time, they would guide different sections of humanity and society in saying, oh, let's change this way, and thus our history has been being funneled towards now, or / 2016 when the books are set, where Earth is at a technological state where, even though we don't have the necessary weapons built already, we technically could build them with what we currently have. And as such, it will be left to be the incumbent Mancynns' job to rise up and seize rulership of Earth and can start guiding people in how they should be operating. Technically, 2016 was not the original date they were going to be going for. There was actually a different year in the middle of the 1900s, the last century, where the different Mancyn, Noah Mason, was the incumbent one. And indeed, the methodology towards, first of all, taking over and then secondly, building the weapons was going to be slightly different. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, which most importantly led to Noah breaking off from the Brethren Lords, he becoming disenfranchised with them and disrupting their operation, that didn't work. And they said, okay, we're going to delay a little longer, a few more decades, and set things up in a better way. Maybe it was slightly too quick by just a small margin there to try to attempt this. We'll try again next century. And they'd also go for a younger Mancyn this time, because hopefully a younger individual will be more malleable. Throughout all of this, it should also just be noted as a side thing that, as a further step to not have the entities notice what they're doing, the Brethren Lords have continued to do their job otherwise of studying the Alpha Realm, including reporting directly back to the entities every so often in case there's anything important. It would be Warren who did those exchanges. He would travel to the new Cortex and discuss there with the entities in person. That's also there. They are keeping up their usual job for saving face. In regards to how long it took them actually, again, also, rather than it simply being a case of they can set up a Mancyn to say, change all of this stuff, and then jump ahead to present day and just say, okay, now Earth is ready, they wanted to go along with the rate of... because I technically haven't said here, if you haven't seen the other videos, I've mentioned there being multiple universes within the Alpha Realm and the beginning and end of chain. The Alpha Realm structure, rather than this being technically mobile within each universe, rather these are a chain of snapshot universes going through with minute changes in each case, and what's happening is our soul energy, our Borea energy, is moving through universe at such a rate that it appears to us to be fluid motion, like an extreme stop motion film. And we still nevertheless have free will because the reality algorithm that determines what the next universes in the chain are going to be is based on what we would be most likely to do next, even if it's a situation where we'd be most likely to do what we think is the least likely thing, etc. Also incorporating time travel when necessary for those who can do that, but as a whole thing. They, the Brethren Lords, for the most part keep up with the flow of time through the Alpha Realm. You have perpetual waves, one after the other, of souls going through, and let's say that the Lords first interacted with this universe here, well, with this soul wave. The soul waves that came ahead of it, they will carry on living their lives free from the interaction from the Brethren Lords. Meanwhile, now all the ones behind it now are feeling like the effects rippling backwards of, or rather, when those waves reach that universe, they will now undergo those same experiences of what happened here. So keep going through this way. Now, let's say that they didn't keep up with this universe. They now fell behind slightly. What you now have is this universe here has a Mancyn that has been being guided and so forth, and suddenly the Brethren Lords just stopped communicating with them, all of a sudden. And they now just have to mysteriously go through the rest of their existence, never knowing what happened. Meanwhile, all the ones from here behind, they now still are getting instructions, so they're going their own way. And what we have at that stage is essentially three branching pathways: the completely unaffected, the aborted, and the continuingly being influenced. And this, if they kept on doing that, they kept on falling back and back, that would keep on splintering off. Therefore, just to save how many different timelines there are, because with each new timeline you have new universes spawned within the Alpha Realm, as I say, they try to keep up as best as possible with the same singular wave passing through. And then the ones behind, it's not like they keep on like being in those universes and interacting again and again, rather those other waves interact, they have the shadow of the experiences, they, for all intents and purposes for them, they are experiencing the exact same thing, yet it's more echoes of the outer region individuals who came in there and did that sort of thing. Either way, they stick here with the universes And it's not like they're going to be travelling through tower to keep up with the wave because the waves are travelling too fast. All of a sudden, they'll jump ahead a few towers each time whenever they need to move to stay within the general vicinity of the one they're following. Meanwhile, when it comes to talking to those Mancynns about what their function is, why they're doing this, again, as an extra step of making sure the entities don't find out the real plan too early and put a stop to them, they tell the Mancynns instead that, this is merely... The Brethren Lords are annoyed that the entities treat them as replaceable. Like, that they lost two individuals, they'll have Mordred instead. Here you go. And they're annoyed by this, as they want to show to the entities, no, they aren't just some side thing that they can just be trivial and have more of them created when necessary. And so them standing up to entities in that respect. So both the motive and also the entirety of the entirety of the plan is kept obscure from them. They only tell the Mancynns what they need to know and say the fear of what's ahead. Because also, again, if the entity was to get a hold of the Mancynn, they don't want those entities finding out that you, some down the line, are probably going to do this, because that could accelerate the rate at which the entities end up realising that they can try that next method next. It's the simulation show, it's inevitable. It's just still, hopefully, a little bit away in the future, as much as possible, relative to the Brethren Lords and the entities. Still, though, for all of me having said this, for all of this being a plan that they are preparing for thousands of our years, this isn't necessarily a plan that they want to do. They don't want to get into the fight. If possible, there is a secondary plan that could succeed without bloodshed, and this would be to find the Ark of Angels, the source of time in the Alpha Realm, that which perpetuates the Borea energy waves continuing to flow around the cycle. Their theory is if they can locate the Ark, the location of which has been hidden by the entities in the past so that nobody would interfere with it, if they can find the Ark, repair the Ark, because it's in it being damaged that it releases the energy that perpetuates the Borea waves. If they can repair the Ark, eventually the Borea waves will slow down and run out. Thus we have no motion of souls, thus nothing's happening. The world, or our dimension, goes back to being static. With that will prevent the Asnemwois from being a threat anymore, because they literally can't move, or that they don't really have any perception of consciousness anymore. They're just, let's say, each version of them in a single moment forever after, along with every other species in our dimension, because, again, who cares about that? The main thing here is, in theory, if they could do that, with the Asnemwois literally being unable to do anything else, that would diffuse any want from the entities to do anything else. You can leave them be now, you don't need to keep on trying to attack them, because, again, let's not go down that dangerous path. Thing is, though, as I say, because the location of the Ark has been hidden even from the Brethren Lords, not that the entities don't trust the Brethren Lords, throughout all of this, the entities have no suspicion of the Brethren Lords. They're completely they're one of us, they're allies, they'll do whatever we want. But just so that in case the information otherwise leaked out, that information's gone for them. And the Ark only exists in one single universe out of the entire chain, in one location. Even with the towers having existed for eons, and you've got a tower of each universe, the chances of finding the Ark out of each and every universe is very small. They are trying as best as possible to search for this artifact that gives them a way out. That doesn't mean they have to attack the entities, but if they can't find it in time, by the time we get to 2016, then they'll have to fall back on this main plan, which is more violent. This is a history, as I said, of the Brethren Lords. At this stage, we have reached their present. Will they have a future as well that I could discuss, or not? You'll just have to see what state they're in at the end of the 4 books. But either way, I'm going to leave it there, rather than talking the specifics of what happens to them in these first 4 books themselves. Find out, you can find the links in the description below. Hopefully you found that interesting. If you did, then of course you can stay up to date for other such sort of content discussions by subscribing to the channel, just looking out for when I post the links in different social media places. Links also below. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like if you did enjoy it. And either way, just because you have no obligations to any of the sort of things, you can do whatever you want. Until I do see you again, though, whether that's you rather going back to old videos, check out new ones. The main thing is that you just remember to keep on telling stories.